The fingers are together facing forward and the palms are down. Then spread the fingers super, super wide. Maybe wiggle the fingers right at each joint. Get all the movement in those joints. And then make a fist. Inhale, open up, spread the fingers, wiggle every single joint you can manage. And then make a fist again. One more time, spread the fingers, wiggle each and every joint and every single finger. And then make that fist, nice tight fist. Release the fist, shake the hands again. Really get them all shaken up. And then bring the hands onto the lap. Close the eyes. You might feel the energy moving in the hands and the fingers and the wrists and the forearms. We've shaken up the energy field, really moved it around. It's a good thing. And so now it's time to relax. We've done a beautiful job today. Using our brain, using our body, our arms, our legs, stretched our backs, strengthened our core. So it's time to rest and let all those good things integrate into the body. And as you find a nice restful place, let the body melt into the chair. You might put a pillow under your low back, or if it's available to you to get down on the floor, lie on your back, on the mat, or a blanket, on a rug. And as you rest in Shavasana today, I have a reading, again from Donna Falls' book, From Root to Bloom. So settle in and let everything soften and relax. The poem, It Is Enough. It is enough right now to taste one moment of peace. Of course I want more, but at least the door's open. It is enough to draw a conscious breath and let my hands relax, fingers releasing their tight grasp on things outside of my control. It's enough to shed a layer of stress, as if taking off a jacket or a pair of too tight shoes. Ease of being has to start somewhere. And this breath is my first step. One breath at a time. Releasing the grip on things we cannot control. Settling into a sense of peace and relaxation in Shavasana. Allowing the mind to rest, the breath to be natural, without effort, allowing the body to breathe just as it knows how, so beautifully. Letting the fingers, the toes, the feet and hands and wrists and ankles relax, and the muscles and the legs and arms soften and melt from the bone. Resting here one breath at a time. This one breath is just enough. Waking only when you're ready to go about your day. Always taking your breath with you, awareness of it, allowing you to live in the moment. Until next time, namaste.
We hope you have enjoyed listening to and participating in Yoga with Nancy, produced for you from the studios at the Talking Information Center. If you would like to listen to this program again, you are invited to access it on our website at ticnetwork.org.
This is an announcement for listeners of the Massachusetts Reading Network. If you are located on Cape Cod or within the surrounding areas and are interested in listening to your local newspapers, the Talking Information Center is making them available on its website. There are just a few simple steps to follow. Please call the Talking Information Center at 781-834-4400 and we would be happy to assist you. Again, for more information about accessing your local Cape area newspapers on the Talking Information Center's website, please call 781-834-4400. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
This is volunteer reader Dave Russell broadcasting from Worcester, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Coming up next, the Talking Information Center is proud to present the Amateur Radio Show, featuring readings chosen by Bob Zeta, who is a longtime ham radio operator in the New England area. Please stay tuned.
Hello, everyone. This is Bob Zeta. My amateur radio call sign is N1BLF, November 1, Bravo Lima Foxtrot. Here in our weekly segment of the Talking Information Center Hobby Programming, I'll be reading from the July 2018 issue of QSD magazine, the monthly publication for all of amateur radio in the United States. QSD is the official journal of the American Radio Relay League, known worldwide as the ARRL. They are headquartered in Newington, Connecticut. I will also be offering selected articles from the current monthly edition of CQ magazine. These articles offer various non-technical amateur radio information. I'll also be inserting interesting news and informational updates from the weekly Courage Handyham program newsletter. The Handyham program has been serving people with disabilities in amateur radio since the year 1967. They are headquartered in Golden Valley, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Since you who are listening enjoy what you receive from the Talking Information Center, I want to give you our internet address. It's www.ticnetwork.org. ticnetwork.org. Canadian radio amateurs petition Parliament to end deliberate interference. Radio amateurs in Canada, primarily in the province of Quebec, have mounted a petition drive demanding that members of the House of Commons prompt decisive regulatory action against a Quebec resident who has been causing deliberate interference. The petition does not spell out the particulars of the allegations, but says the alleged offender, apparently unlicensed, is already known to authorities. Petitioners claim that the individuals, quoting, malicious intentions, close quote, have been threatening the security of emergency radio communication in the province, and they called upon parliamentary lawmakers to ensure the security of high-frequency radio communication. For 2 years, a Nicolet resident near Trois-Rivières, that's Quebec, illegally set up a transmitting radio station and is generating interference on purpose, the petition recounts. Amateur radio operators in Quebec have identified the illegal radio station and brought it to the attention of the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, and its inspectors seized the individual's radio equipment. One of the ISED's functions is telecommunications regulations. According to the petition, the alleged offender acquired new equipment right away and returned to jamming the airwaves. The petition identifies the alleged offender as a male who has regular encounters with the law. We are calling on the government to provide more support to the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada so that it can intervene more decisively in this matter, the petition declared. Radio Amateurs of Canada, RAC, the country's national amateur radio organization, was non-committal, quoting, "While we have not had a chance to investigate the specific details of the incidents that the petitioners referred to, we agree that the importance of acting to support the security of high-frequency communications," RAC said this week. By midweek, the online petition had gathered more than 850 signatures, primarily from Quebec and Ontario. Canada has more than 50,000 amateur radio licensees. Here's the latest information about various school systems throughout the United States. Groups that will host contacts with the space station. It's narrowed down to 7 schools. Amateur radio on the International Space Station, ARISS, has announced that 5 schools and 2 organizations have advanced to the next stage of planning to host amateur radio contacts with the ISS crew members during the first half of 2019. The review team of teachers from the ARIS U.S. Education Committee selected proposals moving the process into Phase 2. ARIS's primary goal is to engage people in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, activities, and involve them in pursuits related to space exploration, amateur radio communications, and associated areas of study and career options, the ARIS announcement said. The schools and organizations are Faith Christian Academy, Orlando, Florida; Hidden Oaks Middle School, Prior Lake, Minnesota; Huntington High School, Huntington, Texas; Moriah Central School, Port Henry, New York; the Children's Inn, INN, at National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland; Park County Public Library with Boys and Girls Clubs of the High Rockies; Fairplay, Colorado; and Pembroke Junior Senior High School, Corfu, New York. ARIS anticipates that NASA will be able to provide scheduling opportunities for these U.S. host organizations. The candidates must now complete an equipment plan that demonstrates the ability to carry out the ham radio contact. Once ARIS approves the equipment plans, finalists will be scheduled as their availability and flexibility match up with the scheduling opportunities. Here's an interesting piece about Iran. As most of you know, as you listen to and watch world news, Iran has frequently been in the world news. But you haven't heard about their activities in the airspaces around the world. The Iranian radars are showing up on 10 meters. While 10 meters has not been the hottest band in the amateur radio toolkit of late, Iran apparently has found it an ideal spot to operate various radars. The interference was audible in International Amateur Radio Union Region 1, that's IARUR1, and perhaps elsewhere in the world. Quoting here, Iranian radars were very active on our 10-meter band every day in the month of May, reported IARU Monitoring System Coordinator for Region 1, Wolf Hadel, KD2OM. On 28.860 megahertz, we could daily receive the strong and long-lasting signals. Other frequencies were used in frequency hopping mode. List of additional amateur radio intruders on 10 meters included, or in some cases no longer included, some of the usual suspects. Hadel reported that FM signals from Russian taxi dispatchers, driftnet fishery boys, and citizens band abusers in Brazil have been operating on various 10-meter frequencies, as usual. Meanwhile, some chronic, intruding signals have disappeared. Among the missing is the 14.295 kilohertz harmonic from Radio Tajik on 4,765 kilohertz, Radio Hagaisa in Somalia on 7,120 kilohertz, said to have been off the air for several weeks due to transmitter failure. Quoting, "We did not miss the transmissions," quipped Hadel, who also expressed the hope that a broadcast battle between Radio Eritrea and Radio Ethiopia on 40 meters may now be at an end. For some time now, Radio Eritrea contended with Ethiopian white noise interference on 7140 and 7180 kilohertz. This month, Ethiopia announced that it would accept a peace deal with Eritrea to end a bloody 20-year-old dispute. And I guess you could say so it goes in the world of radio transmissions and interferences. Well, it looks like the beat goes on with the International Amateur Radio Union, IARU. Region 1 reports editorial warns of the danger of VHF/UHF microwave spectrum grabs. The chair of the International Amateur Radio Union Region 1, Jacques Verlicia, ON4ABJ, has highlighted extended threats to the amateur radio spectrum above 30 megahertz. In an editorial that heads the latest edition of the IARU R1 VHF UHF UW newsletter issued on May 29, Verlicia invited all IARU member societies to consider ways to, quote, promote, defend, and use our frequency. He goes on to comment, they are wanted by others, both government and commercial users. So, this is a wake-up call to be aware that if we are not using those bands, we will lose them. If that happens, he continued, it won't be the fault of our ARUR1, Region 1, but of the amateur community that often has more commitment to HF, high frequency, than to VHF and higher bands. Conceding that the HF bands are the easiest to use, Verlicia said member societies should think outside the box to come up with ideas to improve VHF, UHF, and microwave activities. Verlicia said the vast amount of amateur radio spectrum from 50 megahertz through 5 gigahertz makes it an attractive target for commercial and governmental interest. He noted that 50 megahertz is the focus of a key World Radio Communication Conference 2019 agenda item, specifically to harmonize the 6-meter allocations across all 3 ITU regions. It would be unfortunate to see a repeat of the WRC-15 results for 5 megahertz, where high hopes and years of hard work actually resulted in a few kilohertz at 15 watts EIRP max. A repeat of that situation on 6 meters could mean a far more devastating loss of existing spectrum and future opportunities for digital innovation. The gentleman went on to comment that that's amateur radio's preoccupation with traditional or narrow band modes does not justify the amount of spectrum, noting that some activity levels are quite low outside of contests. Ideally, we need genuine open innovation and to show amateurs leading in the 21st century. Pressures on amateur bands are nothing new, but we know that the spectrum pressures above are not helped by poor engagement, relationships, or lack of a united approach in some member societies with respect to their administrations. Well, here we go again into space. Radio amateurs are set to swap spots on the International Space Station, ISS crew. One radio amateur now aboard the International Space Station will be heading home on June 3, while another will take his place on the crew a few days later. Flight engineer Scott Tingle, Tingle, amateur called KG5NCA, will join Expedition 55 Commander Anton Sakharovsky and the flight engineer Norris Kenai in returning to Earth on the Soyuz MS-7 spacecraft after 168 days on station. A few days later, another trio of space travelers, Alexander Gertz, KF-50NO, Sergei Prokofiev, and Serena Olson-Chandler will head to the ISS on Soyuz MS-09 spacecraft. In a traditional change of command ceremony on June 1, Shkarpilov will hand over command of the station to NASA's Drew Feustel, officially starting Expedition 56. In addition to Feustel, Ricky Arnold, KE5DAU, and Oleg Artemyev will remain on station. This will be the Horizons mission for Gertz of the European Space Agency, who will assume command of the ISS during the second half of his duty tour. Gertz first served on the ISS in 2014 and likely will use the call sign DP0ISS, December Papa 0, India Sierra Sierra for any amateur radio on the International Space Station activities. Here's a communication from Colton Mayer, M-E-Y-E-R, amateur call WD6CWM in Somerset, California. Cheap solution for antenna masks, M-A-S-T-S. I was quite interested in the review of the M-square 6-meter HO loop antenna by Bob Allison, WB1GCM, in a March 2018 issue of QST. I have had failures, or near failures, using electrical conduit for masts, but I've also had successes. For a telescoping mast, 1 1/4 inch MET conduit slides neatly into 1 1/2 inch EMT conduit. Then, in the fencing section of the store, you can use 1 3/8 inch OD fence rail to fit into 1 1/4 inch MET conduit. The fence rail has swagged ends for connecting one piece to another. I drill and pin the overlapping joints, making them stronger than the EMT conduit couplers. That was submitted by Colton Mayer, M-E-Y-E-R, WD6CWN, Somerset, California. How about thinking outside the box? I wanted to thank Ward Silver, N0AX, for his article in the April issue of QST on building, quoting, the personal space weather station, close quote. His article brought huge new possibilities. I had no idea that these types of stations exist, that scientific data consumers always want more from them, and that I could help. About 5 years ago, I invested in satellite hardware and software, but have lost the thrill of it. Now I'm excited to think about converting these to an automatic telemetry RX ground station. Ward's well-researched and excellently presented article gives tons of links to more info on the subject. Thanks again for thinking outside the traditional ham box and for introducing us to yet another way to explore the hobby. Submitted by Darrell Gordon, W4CX, Whiskey 4, Charlie X-Ray, Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a piece of correspondence continuing with the July 2018 letters from our members. It's a very thoughtful piece from Ron Pollack, P-O-L-L-A-C-K, amateur call K2RP, Kilo 2, Romeo Papa, of Encinitas, California. He titles this A Culture of Support. Our weekly net, the Vintage Single Sideband Roundtable, has meant for the past several years, with growing participation of vintage single sideband enthusiasts. Each week, the meeting is hosted by a different member on a rotating basis. John Hecht, H-E-C-H-T, K-C-K-O-I, was a host recently, and he asked members to describe acts of kindness or generosity that they had experienced personally or had witnessed during their careers as amateurs. Each of the responders had a fond memory of such acts, and many had more than one. Tales of help and guidance from mentors were plentiful, but there were also more than a few tales of going above and beyond the call of duty. These ranged from donations of radios and parts, help climbing towers and installing antennas, and even one story from a ham who provided transmitters to newly licensed novices, asking only that the participants pass them along to other beginners when they upgraded. The outpouring of altruistic memories was astounding. Hearing these heartwarming reminiscences not only made me proud to be a member of this community, but pointed out an ethic that I call the culture of amateur radio. This culture has existed since the very beginning of our hobby. It fosters an atmosphere of helping beginners and those wishing to advance skills by sharing experience, parts, knowledge, encouragement, support, and friendship. In almost every case, those beginners who benefit from the culture then pay it forward by sharing what they've learned. There is much concern over the future of a hobby because of the popularity of computers, cell phones, iPads, and all other devices. But the amateur radio culture is unique and gives us something valuable to share with potential newcomers. Let's not forget to emphasize and embody this valuable resource. I'd say that's a very astute observation by Ron Pollock, K2RP, Encinitas, California. Folks, for those of you who'd like to get more information from the Courage Candy Handy-Ham program, they're located in Golden Valley, Minnesota. That's a suburb of Minneapolis. Their email is lowercase handiham @allina.com. I repeat, handiham @allina.com. Their 800 number is as follows. It's 866-426-3442. That's 866-426-3442. They're generally open Mondays through Thursdays between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. United States Central Time. Your best person to contact directly would be the program coordinator, Lucinda Moody, M-O-O-D-Y. Her area code is 612-775-2290. 612-775-2290. She would love to talk to you about the Courage Handy-Ham. She's in charge of the compilation of software tips, operating information, and all of the Handy-Ham program news. It's a publication newsletter that goes out every Wednesday and is available to anyone free of charge. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who listen on a regular basis here on the Talking Information Center, know that all of this information is being processed through what's known as the Talking Information Center, TIC. TIC is a nonprofit rating service that broadcasts newspapers, magazines, books, and special consumer information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to visually impaired and print impaired listeners. The history of TIC goes quite a way back. In 1978, radio station WATD-FM in Marshfield, Massachusetts, proposed donating its sub-carrier signal for the creation of a special service to provide the reading of print information to blind and legally blind individuals living on the South Shore of Massachusetts. A dedicated group of volunteers formed the nonprofit Talking Information Center, and with a grant from the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind, the first such service in New England began broadcasting on June 19th. Since that time, the service has expanded to 6 affiliate locations, serving thousands across the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and of course on the worldwide internet, all over the world. It's been my privilege for about 30 years now to volunteer for TIC, and it is through their auspices and the gentle sharing of 4 programs per month, 30-minute lengths, that the amateur community throughout the United States and the rest of the world as well, again, on the internet, can listen to a variety of amateur radio hobby material. My many thanks to the directorship of the Talking Information Center. This is Bob Zeta, and my amateur radio call is N1BLF, November 1, Bravo Lima Foxtrot, thanking them publicly for their generosity and support over these many years of our combined effort for the community of those who are reading and print impaired. Here's some encouraging news from our happenings section of QST Magazine for July. Amateur Radio Parity Act language inserted in National Defense Authorization Act. The American Radio Relay League has praised the work of U.S. Representative Joe Courtney, Democrat of Connecticut, and Vicky Hartzler, Republican of Missouri, and Mike Rogers, Republican of Alabama, for their successful efforts in securing language in the fiscal year 2019 National Defense Authorization Act that asks the FCC to grant radio amateurs living in restricted communities the right to install effective outdoor antennas. Text from the proposed Amateur Radio Parity Act, which is H.R. 555, form the basis of the Courtney-Hartzler-Rogers Amendment to the National Defense Act. The bill does, entitled Each and Every Amateur Radio Operator Living in the Deed-Restricted Community to Erect an Effective Outdoor Antenna. Full stop. That is the principal benefit of this legislation. ARRL General Counsel Chris Sembley, W3KD stressed. There are tens of thousands of ham radio licensees who now, absent the legislation, cannot erect any outdoor antennas at all. This enables them in the same way PRB1 has enabled hams to address unreasonably restrictive zoning ordinances during the past 33 years. Emily points out, though, that certain conditions apply. Prior to erecting an antenna in a deed-restricted community, an applicant for an outdoor antenna may have to apply to the Homeowners Association, HOA, for prior approval of the particular antenna system proposed by the ham. The Act would not empower an HOA to deny approval of all outdoor antennas, but neither does it entitle radio amateurs residing in deed-restricted subdivisions to erect whatever antenna they want. The amendment, offered by the bipartisan trio and accepted by the House Armed Services Committee by voice vote, will ensure that amateur radio operators will continue to play a vital role in supporting communications in a disaster or an emergency. Amateur radio has long-standing relationships with the Department of Defense through their Military Auxiliary Radio Service, known as MARS, M-A-R-S, and spectrum sharing. The steadfast support of the amateur radio community continually demonstrated by Congressman Kitzinger and Courtney has been a godsend, said ARRL Hudson Division Director Mike Lesenko and to YBB. The Parity Act wouldn't be anywhere close to this stage without their strong support, and our organization is extremely grateful. ARRL has pledged to continue pressing for support to enact the Amateur Radio Parity Act throughout the legislative process. Well, folks, that's about it for this week's hobby show on the Talking Information Center. This is Bob Zeta, amateur call N1BLF. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Be talking to you again soon. 73.
You've just listened to the Amateur Radio Show featuring readings chosen by Bob Zeta, who's a longtime ham radio operator in the New England area. We hope you enjoyed the show, and please stay tuned for more headed your way next.
This announcement is brought to you by PAC TV.
Come to New England Village's Memory Cafe at 664 School Street in Pembroke. The Memory Cafe hosts a monthly gathering where people with memory loss and their companions can come together to make new friends, have some fun, and support one another. A sing-along and art project will be included. Memory Cafe will host its monthly meetings on the last Thursday of the month from 12:30 to 2 p.m. Advance registration is required by calling 508-830-4230. Participants must be accompanied by a family member or caregiver. An optional complimentary lunch is available at 11:30 a.m. for anyone signed up for the Memory Cafe. This Memory Cafe is brought to you by New England Village in partnership with the Center for Active Living. For more information or to register, call 508-830-4230. That's 508-830-4230.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
This is volunteer reader Doug, broadcasting from Marshfield, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Up next from the Talking Information Center, we invite you to tune in for a reading of Fortune magazine.
Hi, this is Bob, and I will be reading from Fortune magazine and Forbes magazine today. And we'll start with Forbes magazine. This is the August 31st, 2018 issue of Forbes. The cover reads, America's Women Billionaires. From a trucking titan to the immigrant taking of Elon Musk in space, our annual ranking of the 60 richest self-made women. And we'll get to that in a second. We'll be highlighting Kylie Jenner. But first, I'll read the fact and comment column by Steve Forbes, who is the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. This is titled, Import Sales Taxes Don't Make Us Richer. One thing to always keep in mind about our trade battles is this. Tariff is another word for sales tax. When you hear of a 25% tariff on steel, translate that into a 25% sales tax on steel. That clarifies the issue. Hitting American businesses and consumers with a slew of new sales taxes on their products, materials, and everyday items such as kids' clothes hurts them. To say exporting countries will feel more pain than we do doesn't negate the truth. We will also be hurt. If deals are not struck, our exporters, particularly farmers, will feel the sting of retaliation. So will our companies that have facilities overseas. How many Buicks or Apple products will be sold in China next year? Another thing to keep in mind, even if particular companies or industries aren't directly involved in international trade, their prospects will be affected. They aren't isolated from buyers, suppliers, and financiers who are more directly involved. Don't underestimate the ripple effect. Look at the 1930s. Most American enterprises weren't exporters or importers, but almost all were hit hard when the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1929-30 ended up crippling the global trade and financial system and triggered a devastating economic contraction. Since the end of World War II, we and much of the rest of the world have been gradually reducing tariffs and other trade barriers, and we have all benefited from this process. Again, look at the 1930s to see the alternative. To sit down and negotiate, say, a free trade agreement with the EU, the UK, or Japan would be terrific. Ditto updating NAFTA. The reason we don't instantly get a free trade utopia in which there are no tariffs or any barriers anywhere is because every country has powerful political constituencies. Ask Canada about our unwillingness to let it freely export softwood lumber and other forest products to the U.S. The U.S. has indeed been the best of the bunch when it comes to freer trade. Perhaps unilaterally imposing sales taxes at the border instead of through the traditional way of negotiating an agreement will ultimately lead to better trade pacts. But we shouldn't rule out the possibility that, at the least, some countries may conclude that, politically, honor comes before a deal. In the meantime, even before the worst of the tariffs may or may not be imposed, all of this uncertainty will dampen investment. We have to fight Beijing's trade abuses, but forging a united front with our allies rather than acting unilaterally would have yielded more fruit more quickly. Another, more ominous factor should be considered as well. These U.S.-instigated trade fights with everyone will, if they persist, seriously fray and perhaps undermine our carefully constructed post-World War II alliances, which have led to the longest-running period without major wars and with growing global economic prosperity. Because of governmental economic errors, the U.S. and its allies have had a nearly generation of subpar economic growth. Thanks to President Trump's push for deregulation and the passage of a significant tax cut, the U.S. is finally starting to break out of this rut. If we experience a Reagan-era-like expansion, other companies will, as they did in the wake of President Reagan's successes, follow us and change some of their growth-stunting economic policies. Bad policies on taxes, money, and regulation were the key causes of our, as well as other nations' stagnation. A series of escalating trade wars will abort our recovery and lead to the kind of everyone-for-himself environment that pockmarked the 1930s. An increasingly chaotic world will damage all of us and strengthen the hands of authoritarian regimes, which are the enemies of democracy. And the next column, also by Steve Forbes, under Fact and Comment, baseball strikes out on playoffs. Here's an important change Major League Baseball, MLB, should immediately make to avoid a colossal postseason embarrassment. Increase the number of playoff games between the wild card teams. As things stand, the top teams in each of the league's 3 divisions automatically qualify for the postseason play that leads to the World Series. The 2 wildcard slots go to the non-division winning clubs that have the best win-loss records in their respective leagues. The problem? The wildcard playoff involves only 1 game. The winner then goes on to play one of the 3 division winners. This is particularly absurd for the game of baseball. Unlike football, in which, statistically, the best team on paper usually wins a game, baseball is different. Any team, no matter how bad, can win a single contest. This year, we could end up with 2 wildcard teams with an impressive 100 wins each during the regular seasons. To have their chances of making it to the World Series rise or fall on 1 game is deeply offensive and undermines fans' faith in the fairness of it all. At the least, MLB should quickly figure out how to make this year a best of 2 out of 3 contest. And beyond that, the MLB should shorten the 162-game regular season and add games to the playoffs. The length of the postseason period hardly needs to be as long as those for basketball and hockey, but the system needs changing to remove the current capriciousness. And next, free markets will save healthcare. The ultimate answer for curing our mostly dysfunctional healthcare markets is to get the patient in control instead of third parties, which primarily are the government, large insurers, and in some cases large employers. In a genuine free market, the customer is king, and if the supplier business doesn't attract new buyers and satisfy existing ones, it will go broke. Productivity is the norm, with prices going down. But not with healthcare. A hospital's revenue depends on the deals it strikes with insurers and on not upsetting Medicare and Medicaid. This is just beginning to change now that more businesses are moving to high-deductible healthcare insurance plans, and the Obamacare exchanges have deductibles that make the private companies look like Bernie Sanders giveaways. People's out-of-pocket medical expenses now come to more than $352 billion a year, not far behind what people spend on the travel industry, which is expected to reach $370 billion in 2018. A rapidly growing consumer market in healthcare is forming. Millions are becoming price conscious in a way that hasn't been seen within memory. Health savings accounts, HSAs, have been around for a decade and a half with more than 22 million users. The money in each account belongs to the consumer. If you save money by using a generic drug instead of one that's still on patent, the money saved is yours, not your employer's or the government's. However, HSAs are burdened with the unnecessary restrictions that hobble their wider use. Make HSAs available to anyone. Currently, you can't get an HSA unless you have an insurance policy that offers them, and most still don't. You should be able to set up an HSA regardless of the plan that you have, even if you have no plan. HSA should also be available to anyone on Medicare or Medicaid. In fact, Uncle Sam should offer a Medicare choice, with the feds kicking in, say, $10,000 annually per beneficiary, with full or nearly full catastrophic coverage above that. Such a plan would sharply curb the gross amount of over-testing that occurs with the elderly. Sharply raise or simply remove the limits on HSA contributions. These have a ceiling of $3,450 for individuals and $6,900 for family plans. Treat the limits on deductibles for company plans in a similar manner. Curtail the restrictions on how HSA monies can be spent. You should be able to tap your account for over-the-counter medications and wellness programs. Babies are not born adults. World-changing inventions rarely arrive full-blown, having to go through any number of iterations and shakeouts before their full significance becomes glaringly obvious to all. Think of the early days of the autos, when 99.9% of U.S. manufacturers failed, or the boom in personal computers in the early 1980s, which was followed by a massive wave of failures and led to some to declare that PCs were no more than toys, or the spectacular dot-com bubble of the late 1990s, which led to a sensational bust that had many supposedly smart observers concluding that information, retail and social websites had no future. Two things, one historical, the other current, recently brought all this to mind. The first was prompted by a documentary, part of the Great War series on YouTube, about Germany's belated attempt to develop a battlefield tank, the A-7V, near the end of World War I. Nearly 2 years before, in 1916, Britain had introduced the first tanks, a handful, into battle. German forces panicked, never having seen such monsters before. It's no surprise that the German High Command initially went into a frenzy, ordering all-out efforts to produce a model of their own, as well as new weapons to neutralize the machines. But almost suddenly, those efforts were throttled. German militarists concluded that tanks were vastly overrated and not worth allocating a meaningful amount of scarce resources. The British and subsequent French tanks were all bark and little bite, as they were prone to breaking down. Their speeds were snail-like, making them easy targets for artillery and even infantry grenade attacks. And they were cumbersome, getting stuck in trenches. In short, tanks were of little or no effective battlefield use. But the learning curve in technology turns that looks messy and even riven with shortcomings today into a world-changing entities tomorrow. Allied tanks improved, as did the techniques for producing them en masse. By 1918, Germany realized it had made a catastrophic blunder. Too late. Sadly, Germany didn't make that mistake again. The second example is with what's currently unfolding with cryptocurrencies. This sector smells of fraud and scams. Bitcoin itself is way down from its highs. A massive shakeout with lots of scandals seems imminent. Government, barely concealing their glee, are cracking down and conjuring up regulations to, quote, protect the consumer. The skeptics will have a field day, but their criticism and scoffing will miss what's happening. An entirely new worldwide ecosystem is emerging. Advances in blockchain technology will soon do the to the global financial payment system what the Internet did to traditional print media. And advances will be made in creating easy-to-use cryptocurrencies that will be genuine and better alternatives to the government fiat currencies we have today. And now the feature story in this month's issue of Forbes magazine, and it's the richest self-made women. Money for nothing, and the clicks are the clicks for free. Not even 21, Kylie Jenner has built a $900 million cosmetics fortune with virtually no employees, capital, or expertise. This new model of extreme fame leverage is radically reshaping business, culture, and politics. And this is by Natalie Robamed. Kylie Jenner sits at a dark wood dining table at her mother's home in Calabasas, California, flicking through display options for a forthcoming pop-up shop. The youngest member of the Kardashian-Jenner industrial complex needs to decide how to showcase products by her Kylie Cosmetics makeup company. She taps her black iPhone X with a silver glittery nail and turns the screen around to show a coterie of employees a vending machine. You guys imagine this, but all in lip kits, says Jenner, dressed in a black blazer and matching black patent Louboutins with bright red soles. I think it needs to be a clear vending machine where you see all the colors. What her half-sister Kim Kardashian West did for booty, Jenner has done for full lips. Like Kardashian West, she has leveraged her assets to gain both fame and money. But while her sister is best known for the former, Jenner has proved adept at the latter in historic fashion. Just 20 when this story publishes, she'll turn 21 in August, and an extremely young mother, she had a baby daughter, Stormy, in February, Jenner runs one of the hottest makeup companies ever. Kylie Cosmetics launched 2 years ago with a $29 lip kit consisting of a matching set of lipstick and lip liner, has sold more than $630 million worth of makeup since, including an estimated $330 million in 2017. Even using a conservative multiple and applying our standard 20% discount, Forbes values her company, which has since added other cosmetics like eyeshadow and concealer, at nearly $800 million. Jenner owns 100% of it. Added to that, the millions she's earned from TV programs and endorsing products like Puma shoes and PacSun clothing, and $60 million in estimated after-tax dividends she's taken from her company, and she's conservatively worth $900 million, which along with her age makes her the youngest person on the 4th annual ranking of America's richest self-made women. We estimate that 37-year-old Kardashian West, for comparison, is worth $350 million. But she's not just making history as a woman. Another year of growth will make her the youngest self-made billionaire ever, male or female, trumping Mark Zuckerberg, who became a billionaire at age 23. Snapchat's Evan Spiegel also became a billionaire in his early 20s, although it's less clear when he passed that threshold. Ultimately, their fortunes all derive from the same place. Social media is an amazing platform, Jenner says. I have such easy access to my fans and my customers. That and a large dose of taste-making are pretty much her entire business, an invention of the Instagram age. Hewlett and Packard immortalized the garage. Jenner has her or her mom's kitchen table. Her near billion-dollar empire consists of just 7 full-time and 5 part-time employees. Manufacturing and packaging, outsourced to Seed Beauty, a private label producer in nearby Oxnard, California. Sales and fulfillment, outsourced to the online outlet Shopify. Finance and PR, her shrewd mother, Chris, handles the actual business stuff in exchange for the 10% management cut she takes from all her children. As ultra-light startups go, Jenner's operation is essentially air. And because of those minuscule overhead and marketing costs, the profits are outsized and go right into Jenner's pocket. Basically, all Jenner does to make all that money is leverage her social media following. Almost hourly, she takes to Instagram and Snapchat, pouting for selfies with captions about which Kylie Cosmetics shade she's wearing, takes videos of forthcoming products, and announces new launches. It sounds inane until you realize that she has over 110 million followers on Instagram and millions more on Snapchat. And many of them are young women and girls, an audience at once massive and targeted, at least if you're selling lip products. And that's before the 16.4 million who follow her company directly, or the 25.6 million who follow her on Twitter, or the occasional social media assist from her siblings and friends. It's not that much different from the early days of Donald Trump's presidential campaign, when his strategy basically consisted of calling into television shows, tweeting provocatively, and holding an occasional rally. Products of reality television, both Trump and Jenner understood how fame can be leveraged, that they are as much brands as people, and that the fame is just another word for free marketing. While this has always been somewhat true, it's the very nature of a celebrity endorsement. Social media has weaponized fame to the point that a real estate mogul can be president, and a 20-year-old from a family famous for being famous can approach billionaire status by monetizing that to the extreme. Given its perpetually young consumer base, the $532 billion beauty industry has always been inordinately driven by influencers and role models. As with fast fashion and clothing, Generation Z consumers have been eschewing lethargic makeup brands like L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, and Coty in favor of quick-to-market products that they learn about via social media. A former esthetician for women like Cindy Crawford and Naomi Campbell, Anastasia Soar, started selling eyebrow pigments and pencils through her Anastasia Beverly Hills in 2000. The line exploded when it reportedly joined Instagram in 2013 and began sending influencers free makeup to publicize the brand. Now, with 17 million followers and products sold in 3,000 plus stores, Soar, 60, debuts on the self-made women list with an estimated $1 billion. Instagram also helped Huda Katan, 34, make our list for the first time this year, with an estimated net worth of $550 million. A makeup artist turned digital influencer. With 26 million Instagram followers, she started Huda Beauty in 2013 after 3 years of blogging about cosmetics. In December, the company sold a minority stake to private equity firm TSG Consumer Partners. Its recent $1 billion valuation translates into 5 times retail sales. Jenner's massive and massively loyal following, however, puts her in a class of her own. The youngest daughter of Kris and Caitlyn Jenner, former Olympic gold medal decathlete Bruce Jenner, sibling of supermodel Kendall Jenner, and half-sister of Kim, Kourtney, Khloe, and Rob Kardashian, Kylie Jenner grew up under a microscope. The family's Keeping Up with the Kardashians first aired when she was just 10 years old, beaming her onto television screens in more than 160 countries. Steered by their mother, Kris, each scion had a money-making scheme, from mobile gaming, Kim, to modeling, Kendall, and even socks, Rob. But the teenage Jenner felt adrift. I struggled for a minute with finding something to do on my own, Jenner says. With her mother's guidance, she started making 7 figures as a model, notching endorsement deals with British retailer Topshop and Sinful Colors nail polish, among others. Unsurprisingly, for a child who grew up on camera, Jenner has always been precocious, especially in her appearance. Ever since I was in 6th grade, I would wear purple eyeshadow, Jenner says. I turned to makeup to help me feel more confident. She learned about makeup by watching YouTube videos and scrutinizing the professionals painting her face for TV appearances and photo shoots. Jenner, who claimed she was insecure about her lips, developed the habit of applying liner beyond her lips' natural perimeter to create the illusion of bigger lips. In August 2014, at age 17, she presciently trademarked the phrase Kylie Lip Kits for the perfect pout, 2 years before going out on her own. As with sister Kim's sex tape fame, Kylie Cosmetics got started by capitalizing on a scandal. By 2014, Jenner's appearance became tabloid fodder as the size of her lips ballooned. On social media, teenagers popularized the Kylie Jenner Lip Challenge, a viral fad in which they inserted their lips into a shot glass and then sucked out the air. In May 2015, she admitted to having temporary lip fillers, and with Kris Jenner dusting off her Kim Kardashian playbook, she almost immediately cashed in on it. I said, "I'm ready to put up my own money. I don't want to do it with anyone else," Jenner recalls. She used some $250,000 of her earnings from modeling gigs to pay an outside company to produce the first 15,000 lip kits. An intuitive marketer like most of her family, she spent months teasing the kits on Instagram, then announced the launch via social media just a day before they went on sale, November 30th, 2015. The kits sold out in less than a minute. Resellers started offering the $29 products on eBay for up to $1,000. Before I even refreshed the page, everything was sold out, Jenner says. This is where Mom comes in again. As with all the Kardashian-Jenner ventures, Kris Jenner tends to drive the big moves. Sensing that this could be an ongoing business, not just a one-time stunt, she brought in e-commerce platform Shopify, run by billionaire Canadian entrepreneur Toby Lutke, in that December. Kylie Lip Kits relaunched as Kylie Cosmetics on Shopify in February 2016, this time stocked with 500,000 lip kits in 6 shades. You could watch the build-up happen on the store as the launch time approached, said Lauren Paddleford, who runs the high-volume Shopify Plus. To watch the internet focus down on one website was crazy, end quote. The numbers kept getting bigger. In November 2016, her holiday collection snagged nearly $19 million worth of orders in the 24 hours after it launched. By the end of 2016, Jenner's company was selling 50-odd products with a revenue of $307 million for a company less than a year old. No other influencer has ever gotten to the volume or had the rabid fans or consistency that Kylie has had for the last 2.5 years, adds Paddleford, whose Shopify Plus also powers online stores of Drake, Justin Bieber, and Kardashian West. Jenner began experimenting with brick-and-mortar retail with a limited Topshop run and pop-ups in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco that saw lines stretched for blocks. Her first pop-up in December 2016 at the Westfield Topanga Mall near Los Angeles attracted 25,000 customers in 14 days. But at the end of the day, why bother? To use Shopify's platform, Jenner paid an estimated $480,000 annually, plus 0.15% of sales, pennies compared with the cost of doing that volume at physical retail. The manufacturing works similarly. Kris Jenner found siblings John and Laura Nelson, inheritors of Spatz Laboratories, which has long produced private label cosmetics out of its 80,000 square foot facility in Oxnard and an outpost in Nanjing, China. That's where all of Kylie's products are now formulated and made. Its parent company, Seed Beauty, also handles everything else, from packaging to shipping fulfillment. Altogether, they employ more than 500 people just to work on Kylie Cosmetics. But it's more than scale. Jenner wisely defers to the Nelsons' know-how rather than develop and test new formulas, a process that can take up to 6 months. That allows Jenner to introduce new products for her trend-driven fan base within weeks of conjuring them. The partnership was so successful that L'Oreal sued Spatz Labs in 2016, in May, alleging it had breached its long-term contract in order to manufacture Jenner's products. Spatz Laboratories denied the claims. The companies are working to reach a settlement as of this publication. It's a huge win for Spatz, which Forbes estimates got paid $180 million in 2017 for products and services, or roughly 55% of total sales. Kylie Cosmetics disputes that figure, but refuses to disclose how much it paid. But the deal also ultimately allows Jenner to be a mogul while sitting at home, posing pictures and pondering new looks. Anything can happen. She is so young. Back at Kylie Cosmetics, world headquarters for the day, looking out at her mom's swimming pool while sipping an iced tea, Jenner prepares to hop into her black Bentley Bentayga to pick up her 5-month-old daughter. Maybe one day I'll pass this on to Stormy, if she's into it, says Jenner, who envisions working on Kylie Cosmetics forever. Such a world view is more in line with a naive 20-year-old than a nearly billionaire mogul. Jenner, of course, is both. It seems far-fetched to think the brand, whose customers are mostly women ages 18 to 34, will last that long, much less independently. Especially with a business tied to the fickle world of personal fame. Stars fall out of public favor or lose interest, and others see the gravy train and jump in. Capitalizing on her front-row view, Kardashian West founded her own line, KKW Beauty, in 2017, and has already nabbed an estimated $100 million in revenue. Rihanna followed in September with Fenty Beauty, which focuses on color-inclusive shades in partnership with LVMH division Kendo. All of them could change their minds, Shannon Coyne, an equity research analyst at BMO Capital Markets, says of the influx of celebrity makeup entrepreneurs. Kylie seems to want to create this beauty empire, but anything can happen, and she's so young. Kylie Cosmetics' growth is already starting to taper off. After leaping to $307 million in 2016, revenue grew just 7% in 2000. I'm sorry, let me read that again. Apologize. After leaping to $307 million in 2016, revenue grew just 7% in 2017, despite the addition of 30 new products. Forbes estimates lip kit revenue dropped 35% from approximately $153 million in 2016 to $99 million in 2017. Still, Kris Jenner says revenue is up considerably in the first 6 months of 2018 compared with the same period last year, a claim that Forbes couldn't verify. Well, while Jenner dismisses the idea of selling out, her calculating mother, who got paid an estimated $17 million by her daughter in the past year, can do the math. It's always something that we're willing to explore, she says. Would someone buy it? It could easily be an instant game-changing acquisition for any company on the hunt for a winning brand with a younger customer, says Tara Simon, Senior Vice President of Merchandising at cosmetics giant Ulta. But celebrity lines cannot command valuations anywhere near the 6 times revenue that other beauty brands demand because of the volatility of relying on one name to sell a product. Kylie Cosmetics could certainly sell for half that, or 3 times sales, which is where Forbes places its valuation. They're not looking to be a sustainable brand, said Mental's Sarah Yindel, referring to Kylie Cosmetics and KKW Beauty. In a couple of years, it wouldn't surprise me if she was on to something else. When you're leveraging your name, you can turn it into anything you want to sell. When you can make such quick cash, who needs a big exit? Kylie Cosmetics has already generated an estimated $230 million in net profit. And sometime later this year, its owner will likely take a title that Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg once held, youngest ever self-made billionaire, redefining in the process the very nature of self-made. It's quite a world we live in. And now we're going to turn to Fortune magazine. This is the July 2018 issue. It's an AI special report. And the headline story is Alibaba versus Tencent. Ma versus Ma. It's M-A versus M-A. Jack Ma of Alibaba and Pony Ma of Tencent build tech empires that dominate China's digital economy. Is the world big enough for both of them? And this is by Adam Lashinsky. There's something irresistible about a clash of titans. The fate of the world hung on the balance during the Cold War standoff between the U.S. and the USSR. Coke versus Pepsi, one mattered mightily. Ali Foreman defined a pugilistic era. And then there's the celebrity spat pitting Taylor Swift against Kanye West. Look what he made her do. For sheer global commercial stakes, however, these epic clashes have nothing on the battle between the two heavyweights of Chinese internet industry, Alibaba and Tencent. Both have market capitalizations that hover over $500 billion US. Both command sectors of the rapidly growing Chinese digital landscape. Tencent owns the leading gaming and messaging platform, while Alibaba rules e-commerce. Both are aggressive investors inside and outside China. Each is the pride of their not-so-quite first-tier hometowns, Alibaba of the ancient city of Hangzhou near Shanghai, and Tencent, a shiny new Shenzhen across the border from Hong Kong. Finally, both touch an astounding percentage of the world's most populous country. Alibaba's various online marketplaces counts 552 million active customers. Tencent's WeChat messaging services recently surpassed 1 billion accounts. For all these similarities, Tencent and Alibaba are sharply distinct companies, as different in culture, style, and approach as Apple is from Google. The duo sprang from the same era, the late 1990s, when China was discovering the Internet, and for years they built giant businesses more or less out of each other's way. Yet as they've grown, which inevitably has begun to encroach on the other's turf. Tencent, for instance, is investing in retail and financial services, sectors that are Alibaba's strength. Alibaba, in turn, sees an opening in Tencent's domain, particularly by offering mobile messaging tools to its vast network of small business partners. There's one last unavoidable comparison between the two combatants. Their top leaders share a surname, though Alibaba's Jack Ma and Tencent's Pony Ma aren't related. As the Chinese character for Ma signifies a horse, the genesis of Pony's English nickname, the contest between the two stallions of the Chinese internet literally is a two-horse race. And the trophy they're racing for is nothing less than the #1 position in a digital economy that's growing faster and evolving more dynamically than any other nation's. The two men who've known each other for years are quick to profess mutual respect. But as their rivalry heats up, those assertions are increasingly a prelude to damning the other with faint praise, or worse. Hugh Tang, Pony Ma, a reserved engineer who rarely speaks to Western media, lashed out at Alibaba at the Fortune Global Forum in Guangzhou, China, in December, for example. Ma, who is 46, compared his nemesis to make it easy to do business anywhere. So that last sentence probably didn't make sense because I turned 2 pages in the magazine. So I'm going to start that sentence again. Ma, who is 46, compared his nemesis to a greedy landlord because Alibaba's market-leading Taobao e-commerce site charges merchants listing fees. Our position is not to compete with our partners, but to enable them, said Ma, speaking in Mandarin through an interpreter. Alibaba, he noted, can raise the rent on its tenants whenever it wants, whereas Tencent doesn't have a mall where we rent the shops to vendors. Instead, he argued, WeChat offers a decentralized platform that partners can use to sell things independently from Tencent with no rental fee. Months later, 53-year-old Jack Ma, a globe-trotting business celebrity with a gift for gab, returns the volley without mentioning his competitor by name. Tencent has a reputation as a company adept at wringing profits out of its platform. Culturally, we are very different, the Alibaba founder says, speaking expressively in English during a recent interview at Alibaba's headquarters in Hangzhou. We're more idealistic. We want to do something good while making money. We trust people more than our products. There are limits to this arch-enemy motif. Alibaba and Tencent attack the market differently, in ways that have often allowed them to grow without butting heads. Alibaba is largely a strategy of buying controlling stakes in businesses that are a fit with its commerce platform. Tencent takes hundreds of minority stakes in an array of businesses to win over partners and gain access to their technology. What's more, the competition is hardly a zero-sum game, thanks to the rapidly expanding Chinese middle class. Still, the companies can and do play hardball. In an economy in which e-commerce is dominant in ways unthinkable in the U.S., each company stymies the other's payment service on their main platforms. And when Tencent and Alibaba sign on investment bankers, they reportedly make it a condition that the bankers work exclusively for them. Many companies impose such restrictions, but they have greater consequences coming from Tencent and Alibaba, given that the two are also major venture capital investors, and the prohibitions could impinge on work with the companies in which they invest. Even if the world is big enough for both of them, Tencent and Alibaba increasingly are in conflict. Until recently, everyone played in their own sandbox, says Deborah Weinzweig, New York-based CEO of the China-focused retail consultancy CoreSite Research. Now the sand is starting to spill over. Hangzhou is famous for its bucolic West Lake and for being the terminus of a canal from Beijing that a millennium ago made it one of the richest cities in China. Today, it is best known for the place where Jack Ma and 17 friends started Alibaba in the drab Hupan apartment complex in 1999. Alibaba maintains the Hupan site in its original state, but not as a museum. Instead, the company uses it as a history-steeped new business incubator. A short drive from Alibaba's massive headquarters, a campus of steel and glass buildings that wouldn't be out of place in Silicon Valley, the Hupan apartment is stuck in China's pre-glamorous phase. A baby stroller and laundry drying on clotheslines sit outside the building, presumably belonging to people who, unlike Alibaba's employees, actually live in the complex. Up a short flight of stairs, 40-some engineers are crammed into a 4-bedroom apartment where photos of the founding Alibaba team adorn the walls. A whiteboard bears a famous quote from the late Paramount leader Deng Xiaoping. Development is the absolute principle, it states, scribbled there by another Paramount leader, Jack Ma himself. The fledgling business enlivening the apartment today is called Ding Talk, and its placement in this grimy flat, a dilapidated microwave and spaghetti-wired server rack, attests to its startup authenticity, is purposeful. Ding Talk is meant to take on Tencent's category-leading WeChat messaging service, you see, and its leaders have been bestowed the ultimate privilege of incubating a business here. The apartment is a holy space, says Chris Wang, head of global business development for Ding Talk, noting three illustrious businesses that preceded Ding Talk here. Alibaba itself, originally a website that matched vendors with suppliers. Taobao, its main retail platform, which dominates Alibaba's business today, and Alipay, the payment product that became Ant Financial Services, a multi-billion-dollar operation in its own right. At first blush, the similarities between Ding Talk and WeChat are striking. Users can employ it to send messages, make phone calls, and exchange contact information, just like WeChat. Yet the guts of Ding Talk, a series of low-cost Slack and Skype-like enterprise communications and collaboration programs, reflect Alibaba's commercial orientation. Alibaba's mission, any employee can tell you, is to make it easy to do business anywhere. Ding Talk's goal is to provide WeChat-like functionality to small businesses and then to upsell them typical business software fare like customer relationship and cloud storage tools. Small and medium-sized enterprises need something very low cost, says Wang. We at Alibaba have access to great technology that smaller companies lack. After years of teaching businesses how to use technology, selling it to them directly is a major new thrust for Alibaba. It made significant investments in selling cloud computing rental services, for example, and now it's the leading provider in China, reaping $2.1 billion in revenue last year from that business. Amazon began implementing a similar strategy in the U.S. around the same time, and 2 years ago, Alibaba started pursuing a new retail concept of providing technology and services to traditional retailers, including grocers, department stores, and even mom-and-pop bodegas. The new retail push aims to digitize the most mundane businesses. On a lazy afternoon in late May, Wang An, who with his father run a small market in Hangzhou near Zhejiang University, proudly demonstrates that he has learned as a guinea pig for Alibaba's integrated retail program. He and his dad have rebranded their shop about the size of a typical 7-Eleven, the Tmall Weijun supermarket, Tmall being Alibaba's online emporium for higher-end brands. The program brings the small operator modern tools like inventory management software and sensors to monitor foot traffic, as well as camera-generated heat maps to show where customers are spending their time. I don't need to second-guess my judgment anymore because it's based on data, says Wang, who manages that data on a desktop computer as well as his mobile phone. The Alibaba-affiliated store is just one part of the conglomerate's so-called online-to-offline strategy. Alibaba has taken stakes in an electronics chain, Suning, and has a Costco-like hypermart, Sun Art. It has opened its own line of grocery stores called Hema, where affluent shoppers can choose a live fish from a tank and have it prepared for lunch. And it has bought outright Ele, that's ELE.me, a leading food delivery service. Each is a customer for Alibaba's cloud and other technology services, as well as a way to expand the customer base for the market-leading Alipay. We always focus on commerce, says Daniel Chang, Alibaba's CEO. Jack Ma is executive chairman, having given up the CEO role 5 years ago. Commerce, in fact, is the glue that holds together Alibaba's disparate parts. It began Alipay as a way to let merchants collect from shoppers on Taobao. Now Alipay is part of Ant Financial, which recently raised $14 billion, thought to be the largest venture capital investment ever. Alibaba co-opted Singles Day, an unofficial holiday that celebrated unmarried adults, creating what Americans would call a Hallmark holiday by turning it into a nationwide orgy of e-commerce. Singles Day in 2017 rang up total sales of $25.3 billion. That's almost $6 billion more than Americans spent online over the entire 5-day Thanksgiving weekend shopping period. Alibaba also stitched together an alliance of shipping companies to form a China-wide delivery giant called Cainiao, in which Alibaba has steadily increased its ownership stake. Excuse me. Its goal, as directed by Jack Ma, is to be able to deliver merchandise anywhere in China within 24 hours, no small feat, and globally in 72 hours, also a stretch goal. These disparate but coordinated parts encapsulate Alibaba's commercial worldview, and also its view of how it matches up favorably, if it does say so itself, with Tencent. They don't operate anything outside of China, says Joe Che, Alibaba's U.S.-educated vice chairman and Jack Ma's longtime finance and strategy lieutenant. They kind of want to take the shortcut approach by sprinkling some investments in these countries. Only when you operate can you generate synergies and really create exponential value. Whereas if you just make financial investment, you're counting an internal rate of return. You're not creating value. So the rest of this article will deal with Tencent and then some discussion of the two companies again at the end. And I won't have time to read all of that today, so I'm going to stop there with this article, and then I'll pick up the rest of it next week. So now we're going to go to the briefing section of this month's Fortune magazine. And this next article, Red Staters see green in hemp. A crop from American history could be making a big comeback after nearly 5 decades. And this is by Jeff John Roberts. Farming. Once grown on the estates of Washington and Jefferson and used in everything from textiles to food, hemp is as American as they come. And yet, according to a recent report for Congress, the United States imported $78 million more of the green stuff than it exported in 2015. It's the sort of trade imbalance some might call sad. The reasons for the hemp deficit, however, have nothing to do with the policies of China and Canada, which are the two biggest suppliers to the U.S. Instead, the problem lies with increasingly outdated domestic drug laws. Hemp is derived from the same plant as marijuana, Cannabis sativa, but uses strains low in the psychoactive compound THC. Still, the association was enough to get the crop regulated under the Controlled Substances Act, passed in 1970, severely curtailing domestic production. There's changes afoot, though, and the Trump administration appears poised to accelerate it. Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue expressed support in June for a Senate bill authored by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who represents Kentucky, a state set to benefit from a hemp boom that would expand the production of industrial hemp in the U.S. The bill has bipartisan support and comes at a time of growing awareness among policymakers that hemp and marijuana are not the same crop. Jeff Whaling, who leads the National Hemp Association, says he's optimistic about the crop's future in the U.S. based on his conversations with Secretary Perdue's office and the growing support for hemp across corporate America. And next from the briefing section, online success doesn't come cheap. Target is holding its own against Amazon, but at too great a price, investors fear. This is by Phil Waba. Being a contender can cost a lot of money. Target shareholders were reminded of that when the discount retailer recently reported strong online sales growth in its first quarter, figures that showed it is holding its own against Amazon and Walmart. Digital sales rose 28% even as more shoppers came to stores, showing that Target's efforts to one-two punch web and brick-and-mortar retail is working. But that has come at a price that worries some investors, as the sharp drop in Target's stock the day that the earnings results showed. Target's operating income margin fell, and the retailer's recent 40% cut to the price of the next-day delivery will bite into profits, as will its $7 billion multi-year program to freshen up stores and improve its e-commerce. Walmart, Kohl's, and Nordstrom have also poured billions into their e-commerce offerings and have been periodically punished for it by Wall Street, despite building themselves thriving online businesses. Investors may have to buck up about the expenses all this entails. It's simply the cost of doing business in the Amazon era. And next, Ford's iconic move. Michigan Central Station, the poster child for Detroit's urban blight, could soon be a beacon for regeneration after being bought by the Ford Motor Company. Abandoned for more than 3 decades, the monolith will form part of a 1.2 million square foot campus in the Corktown neighborhood and will house teams working on new mobility technologies. And next, electronic sports, real money. A recent legal ruling could level up interest in esports, and this is by Jonathan Sperling. Oddsmaker rejoiced in May when the U.S. Supreme Court decided to strike down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, paving a way for states to legalize sports betting. Gambling on sporting events has come a long way in the more than 25 years in which the PASPA law was passed. Esports, that is, competitive computer gaming, has quickly risen to become one of the premier vessels for sports betting, and with its rise come questions on how the ruling will affect the future of the industry. For esports betting, the PASPA decision opened the door for any meaningful traction in the U.S., says Chris Grove, the managing director of Eilers & Krejcik Gaming, an industry research firm. You'll never see game publishers get anywhere close to betting unless there is a tightly regulated market, he says. In a report that analyzed the intersection of gambling and esports, Grove projected that the total value of money and in-game items wagered on major esports titles would hit $12.9 billion by 2020, with more than 6.5 million consumers placing wagers. For comparison, the total size of the legal sports betting market in Nevada was $4.8 billion in 2017. In terms of future dangers coming to esports as a result of the ruling, underage gambling and damage to competitive integrity could rise, but no more than they would in a gray market, according to Bryce Bloom, a founding partner at the firm ESG Law, which represents more than 25 Western esports organizations. Says Bloom, we need to accept the fact that betting on esports is going to happen whether we like it or not, and actively become part of the solution. Well, I've come to the end of my time reading for you. This has been Bob, and I've been reading from Forbes and Fortune magazine. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you for listening to this reading of Fortune Magazine, brought to you from the Talking Information Center. Please stay tuned. More programs are headed your way.
Hi, this is Bob Branco, one of the co-hosts for In Perspective. You can still hear our programs on the TIC website. Just go to www.ticnetwork.org and hear any show that's available to you. Again, www.ticnetwork.org.
I heard on the news about that 5-year-old who found his uncle's gun. The kid didn't know it was loaded.
I heard on the news about that 14-year-old girl who was bullied online for like a year. She couldn't take it anymore, so she got her dad's gun from his nightstand.
I heard on the news about that guy who broke into someone's house, stole a gun from the hall closet.
He accidentally shot his cousin in the head.
She killed herself.
And later, killed the owner of the store he was trying to rob.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
This is volunteer reader Eileen Richard, broadcasting from Springfield, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Now you are cordially invited to stay tuned to the Talking Information Center for Storytime. It's headed your way next.
You are listening to the Talking Information Center with Melody Starr reading Fancy Nancy, the Dazzling Book Report.
Monday is my favorite day. Why? Monday is library day. Before we leave, we select a book. Select is fancy word for pick. It's like getting a present for a week. Bree select a book on dinosaur. Robert select a book of funny poems. Teddy select a scary story. I select a book about Indian girl. She has a fancy name, Saka. Later, Miss Glass has thrilling news. Thrilling is even more excited than excited. We get to do a book report. Your first book report. How grown up? My mom says at dinner. Yes, I know, I say. My book is a biography. It is about a real person. After dinner, I read my book. Dad helped with hard words. I learned all about Saka. Saka was a princess. She lived 200 years ago out west. She helped 2 explorers reach the Pacific Ocean. Mom takes me to the art store. I need stuff for the cover of my book report. I want it to be great. I am the second best artist in the class. This isn't bragging. You can ask anybody. I get a bag of little beads, some yarn, and some markers. I started working on the cover. I worked on it every night. I made Saka look very brave because she was. She found food for the explorers. She kept them safe from enemies. Just remember to leave time for words, Mom kept saying, I will, I will. I tell her, Miss Glass wants you to write about the book, Dad says over and over. That's what a report is. I know that, I tell him. Writing the words will be easy. Ta-da! The cover is finished. Saka has yarn breathing, leading and friends are glued on her clothes. I must admit, it is dazzling. That is the fancy for eyes popping. Now I will write my report. I get out of linen paper and a pen with plum. That's a fancy word for feathers. The trouble is, I am tired. I know all about Saka, but the right words won't come. What am I going to do? I have to hand in my report tomorrow. I am desperate, I tell Mom. That means I'm in trouble. Mom lets me stay up longer. Still, my report ends up only 2 sentences long. The next day, everyone sees my cover and say, wow. But hearing others report makes me nervous. All of them are longer than mine. All of them are more interesting. I read my report. Saka was a hero. She helped people in trouble. Everybody waited to hear more, but there is no more. I spent too much time on the cover. I tell Miss Glass. Miss Glass understands. Why don't you tell the class about your book? So I did. So I do. I tell them all about the brave things Saka did. Saka was a heroine. Miss Glass is a heroine too. At least she is to me. And that's the end of that story of Fancy Nancy Dazzling Book Report.
You are listening to the Talking Information Center, and this is Melody Starr reading Henry and the Mudge in Puddle Trouble.
The Snow Glory. When the snow melted and spring came, Henry and his big dog Mudge stayed outside all the time. Henry had missed riding his bike. Mudge had missed chewing on sticks. They were glad it was warmer. One day when Henry and Mudge were in their yard, Henry saw something blue on the ground. He got closer to it. Mudge, he called. It's a flower. Mudge slowly walked over and sniffed the blue flower. Then he sneezed, "Hachoo! Hachoo!" all over Henry. "Ah, Mudge," Henry said. Later, Henry's mother told him that the flower was called a snow glory. "Can I pick it?" Henry asked. "Oh no," said his mother. "Let it grow." So he didn't pick it. Every day he saw snow glory in the yard, blue, and looked so pretty. He knew he shouldn't pick it. He was trying not to pick it. But he thought how nice it would look in a jar. He thought how nice to bring it inside. He thought how nice it would be to own Snow Glory. Every day he stood with Mudge and looked at the flower. Mudge would stick his nose into the grass all around the Snow Glory, but he never looked at it the way Henry did. Don't you think Snow Glory has been growing long enough? Henry would ask his mother. Let it grow, Henry, she said. Oh, Henry wanted that Snow Glory. And one day, he just knew he had to pick it. So he took Mudge by the collar and he stood beside the Snow Glory. I'm going to pick it, Henry whispered. Too much. Let it grow long enough. Henry bent his head and he said in Mudge's ear, now I need it. And Mudge wagged his tail, licking Henry's face, then put his big mouth right over that Snow Glory, and he ate it. No, Mudge, Henry said, but too late. There was a blue flower in Mudge's belly. I said need it, not eat it, shouted Henry. He was so mad because Mudge took his flower. It was Henry's flower, and Mudge took it. And Henry almost said, bad dog, but he stopped. He looked at Mudge, who looked back at him with soft brown eyes and the flower in his belly. Henry knew it wasn't his Snow Glory. He knew it wasn't anybody's Snow Glory. Just a thing to let it grow. And if someone ate it, it was just a thing to let go. Henry stopped feeling mad. He put his arm around Mudge's big head. Next time, Mudge, he said. Try to listen better. Much wagged his tail and licked his lip. One blue petal fell from his mouth into Henry's hand. Henry smiled, put it in his pocket, and they went inside. In April, it rained day after day after day after day. Henry was getting bored. Mooch was chewing up everything in the house. So Henry said, let's play outside anyway. He put his raincoat and sneakers on and went outside with Much. He forgot to ask his father if it was all right. When Much stepped into the wet grass, he lifted his paw and shook it. Too bad you don't have sneakers, Henry said, and he walked in a circle around Much. Squish, 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 squish. Much listened, and looked at Henry. Then he got closer to Henry and wagged his tail and shook the water from his big, wet, furry body all over Henry. Henry wiped the water from his face. Ah, Much, he said. The two of them went walking, and down the road they found a big puddle, an giant puddle, a lake puddle, an ocean puddle. And Henry said, wow. He started running. Much got there first. Splash, splash. Muddy water all over Much. Splash. Muddy water all over Henry. It was the biggest, deepest puddle they had ever seen, and they love it. When Henry's father called for Henry and didn't find them, he went outside. He looked down the road. Splash, he heard. He put on his raincoat and went walking. Splash, he saw. Henry's father saw Much with a muddy face and muddy tail and muddy in between. Henry's father saw Henry with a muddy face and muddy sneakers and muddy in between. And he yelled, Henry, no more splashing. Just a boy and dog drifting. Hi, Dad, Henry said with a little smile. Much wagged his tail. Henry, you should have asked me first. Henry's father said. I know, said Henry. I am surprised at you. Henry's father said. I'm sorry, said Henry. I don't know what to do with you, Henry's father said. Henry looked sad. Then Mudge wagged his tail, licking Henry's hand, and shook the water from his big, wet, furry body all over Henry and Henry's father, Mudge. Henry yelled, "Henry!" Henry's father stood there with a muddy face and muddy shoes and muddy in between. He looked at Mudge. He looked at Henry. He looked at the big puddle. Then he smiled. "Wow," he said, and he jumped in. He splashed water on Mudge. He splashed water on Henry. He said, "Next time, ask me along." Henry said, "Sure, Dad." And Henry splashed him back. May, the cat who lived next door to Henry and Mudge, had little kittens. There were 5 kittens. One was orange, one was gray, one was black and white, and 2 were all black. The kittens sometimes stayed in their boxes, in their front yard, to get some sun, while the mother cat rested. One day, Henry and Mudge peeked in the box. They saw tiny little kitten's face and tiny little paws, and heard tiny little kitten meow, meow, meow. Mudge sniffed and sniffed and sniffed. He wagged his tail and sneezed, "Achoo! Achoo!" and sniffed some more. Then he put his big head into the box, and with his big tongue, he licked all 5 kittens. Henry laughed. "Do you want some kittens of your own?" he asked Mudge. Mudge grunted and wagged his tail again. Whenever the kittens were in their front yard, Henry and Mudge visit the box. Henry loved them little noses, and he had even given them names. He called them Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Henry loved planets, too. Yeah. While Henry was at school, one day, a new dog came up Henry's street. The 5 kittens were sleeping in the box in their yard. Mudge was sleeping in Henry's house. When the new dog got closer to Henry's house, Mudge's ears pricked up. When the new dog got even closer to Henry's house, Mudge's nose went in the air, and just when the new dog was in front of the house, and the mudge start barking. Arf, arf! He barked and he barked and he barked until Henry's mother opened the door. And just as Mudge ran out the door, the new dog was in the neighborhood yard, looking in the kitten's box. And just as the new dog was putting his big teeth into the box, Mudge ran up behind. Snap went Mooch's teeth when the new dog saw him. Snap went Mudge's teeth again. When the new dog looked back at the box of kittens, Mudge growled. He looked into the eyes of the new dog. He stood ready to jump, and the new dog backed away. And from the box, he didn't want the kittens anymore. He just wanted to leave, and he did. Mudge looked in the kitten's box. He saw 5 tiny faces and 5 skinny tails and 20 little paws. He reached in and licked all 5 kittens. Then he lay down beside the box and waited for Henry. Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn went back to sleep. And that's the end of that story of Henry and Mudge.
You've just heard the Talking Information Center's presentation of Storytime. We hope you enjoyed it, and please visit our website, ticnetwork.org, to hear more great programs.
Coming soon from the Talking Information Center, join reader Judith Casulo as she presents the book Saints for All Occasions by J. Courtney Sullivan. Nora and Teresa Flynn are 21 and 17 when they leave their small village in Ireland and journey to America. Nora is the responsible sister. She's shy and serious and engaged to a man she isn't sure that she loves. Teresa is gregarious. She's thrilled by their new life in Boston and besotted with the fashionable dresses and dance halls on Dudley Street. But when Teresa ends up pregnant, Nora is forced to come up with a plan, a decision with repercussions they are both far too young to understand. 50 years later, Nora is the matriarch of a big Catholic family with 4 grown children. John, a successful, if opportunistic political consultant. Bridget, quietly preparing to have a baby with her girlfriend. Brian, at loose ends after a failed baseball career. And Patrick, Nora's favorite, the beautiful boy who gives her no end of heartache. Estranged from her sister, Teresa is a cloistered nun, living in an abbey in rural Vermont. Until after decades of silence, a sudden death forces Nora and Teresa to confront the choices they made so long ago. Saints for All Occasions by J. Courtney Sullivan will air for 18 episodes on the Pure Fiction Book Hour beginning August 9th and ending September 3rd.
My name is Tom Thornton.
And my name is Cindy Thornton. We've been married 38 years, we're retired, and this is how we live united.
We play golf and we travel, but we also decided we were going to give to and volunteer with United Way at our community free health clinic.
I do the nursing at the clinic.
I work the front office, checking in patients, greeting them, making them feel comfortable.
United Way is how we contribute, because we know our time and money are going to the right places, the places that need it most and implement it best.
Judging by the thank yous we get at the clinic, I'd say we're doing the right thing with our retirement, too.
We even get a few bless yous. It's incredible.
We're Tom and Cindy Thornton. We volunteer at our community free health clinic, so we don't just wear the shirt.
We live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Thank you for listening to the Massachusetts Reading Network, a window to independent life in your community from Cape Cod to the Berkshires.
This is volunteer reader Jennifer Rajala broadcasting from Worcester, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for more coming your way next.
WRRS Middleborough, Pittsfield, WVBF Middleborough, WDJM Framingham, WUML Lowell, WLLO Londonderry.
Please stay tuned to the Talking Information Center, for up next is a reading from the weekend edition of Plymouth's Old Colony Memorial newspaper.
Good morning. This is Jake Jacobs with this week's reading of the Old Colony Memorial. First article, Honorary Viking. 2-day sail with the Draken gives reporter a taste of life on the sea. Call me Eric. The Harberts have never claimed any Viking heritage as far as I know, but after 2 days of sailing with the crew of the Draken Harald Harfarg, I must at least qualify for honorary bragging rights. It's hard not to feel you have arrived at one of life's defining moments when you're standing at the tiller of the world's largest modern Viking ship setting a course for home. Thanks to the wonderful folks at the Plymouth Area Chamber of Commerce and Destination Plymouth County, as well as my longtime friend and colleague, Emily Clark, Monday evening found me beside Captain Bjorn Allander on the bridge of the Draken, the 115-foot open-hulled longship that Allander and his crew sailed across the North Atlantic. Two years ago. Friedrich, the ship's first mate, called it food for the soul as a massive boat clipped across the Gulf of Maine at 4 knots. Somewhere to the west, behind the setting sun, a foghorn warned of shoals off New Hampshire. Food for the soul, yes, but it may have been more of a feast. Allander had warned at the start of our journey from Boothbay Harbor to Plymouth that the weather might force us to travel under power of the boat's twin engines. The boat was simply not built to sail directly into the wind, and a reception was waiting. But after hours of motor sailing through a sea of fog, the wind shifted and the sky cleared, and Allander gave the order that brought a cheer from the crew. We were going to raise the sail. Allander and his crew welcomed me aboard the Draken Sunday afternoon in the charming boating village of Boothbay, the first stop on what they expected to be a 4-month tour of the eastern seaboard. I had learned from Emily's stories all about the ship, how Allander and his crew had sailed it from Norway to America. Following in the wake of Leif Erikson, the Vikings thought to have discovered the New World hundreds of years before Columbus. But nothing really prepares you for the prospect of stepping aboard and calling it home, if only for a couple of days. Checking in on Sunday with me were Plymouth residents Ken Reardon and Maine native Bob Carlson, and sailors who won online auctions for slots on the crew. Tours are still being conducted for the people at Boothbay Harbor, so we tagged along learning everything from where the crew eats and sleeps to how the Vikings use dragons, draken, and ravens in their sailing. Dragon heads and tails at the bow and stern of the ship were meant to frighten the enemy. Ravens were released at sea to learn if the boat was near land. If the birds flew off, but later returned, land was nowhere in sight. The ship had seen some modifications since it was built in 2012. Washboards were added above the gunwales to keep the sea at bay. A new mast was added after the original 79-footer snapped in a storm during sea trials off Scotland. The crew went to shore and found a 79-foot Douglas fir replacement. The ship is open-hulled, so there is no below deck, but a layer of pine decking was added over the original oak deck to create a series of storage compartments. The boat's 2 restrooms are located below deck as well. The heads require some tricky climbing, but offer the only solitude on board. The boat was built in Norway, so the heads were affectionately named Sweden and Denmark. 2 tents dominate the middle of the ship. The smaller carpenter's cabinet is reserved for the engineer, but doubles as the infirmary if needed. The larger tent aft is the sleeping quarters, twin rows of sleeping platforms where the crew crams in like sardines to catch its sleep. With watches running around the clock, there is always someone in the bunks. White and black tape help differentiate between day and night watch bunks. Just aft is the kitchen, home of the hardest workers on the boat. 2 cooks seemingly never stop preparing meals. They serve up breakfast, lunch, dinner, and every day, plus morning and afternoon fika. Fika is a Swedish word for taking a coffee and snack break, but normally means much more on board the Draken. It is a chance to pause and catch up with friends, an escape from the grind. The time between meals is also the place between destinations and is the most important part of the day, says the captain. Upstilling is another Swedish word that is a part of the daily routine. It's the call to muster when the crews gather near the bridge to hear from the captain, the mates, or their watch captains. The multinational crew work 4-hour shift and theoretically get the next 2 off, but it's all hands on deck when the captain decides to raise or lower the sail. This is a demanding and dangerous maneuver as the yard and furling sail normally rests on the gallows in line with the ship above the bunkhouse. To raise all 3,000 pounds of wood and canvas, the crew divides into 4 and aft teams. Near the bridge, 3 teams of 4 use wooden poles to crank a winch known as a windlass. Once the yard and sail are halfway aloft, the crew tilts it all on one end and walks it through the shroud so it can be positioned to catch the wind. It is then hoisted the rest of the way up the mast and finally trimmed for maximum speed and efficiency. The crew mostly volunteers with interest in Vikings. Tall ships are both. Make it look easy, but with 1.5 tons of wood and canvas flapping about, the potential for injury cannot be ignored. The boat can sail up to 12 knots, but averages only 4 when you factor in the time it takes to set sail and make adjustments. Our trip to Plymouth started 12 hours later than planned. Olander said he wanted to leave Maine Monday morning, not Sunday night, so he'd have more light to maneuver out of the harbor filled with boat moorings and lobster trap buoys. Sunny skies gave way to fog just outside the harbor, but visibility remained good enough to take in the remarkable beauty of the Maine coast and spy a pod of dolphins off the port bow. A small flotilla of pleasure boats escorted us to the end of the Booth Bay Peninsula, where fog seemed to envelop the ship. We motor sailed all day Monday, occasionally spotting a sunfish, a buoy, or a distant fishing boat. Mostly it was hour after hour of solitude, with the crew used to give lessons in tying knots and trimming the sails. Some played cards, others curled up and slept on the deck. The skies cleared as we cleared our plates. After dinner and prompting the first sail, it all came back down again in the dark amid concerns that heavy weather was approaching from the west. The rain thankfully held off, and the sunrise found us just off Duxbury Beach, with Gurnet Light fast approaching. Deb, the forward lookout on the 4 to 8 shift, spotted a whale. More dolphins swam by to the west. Some fishing boats leaving Plymouth stopped by for a look, but most went right about their work. Cruising south, we soon passed Plymouth Beach, Warren Cove, and Rocky Point, where the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant offered a stark contrast to the recreated Viking ship that ruled the sea a millennium ago. With breakfast cleared, Outlander once again delivered good news. With hours to kill before our expected arrival in Plymouth Harbor on the afternoon high tide, we would spend the morning sailing in Cape Cod Bay. The red canvas unfurled just off Manamet Point, and Outlander set a course for the southeast with Bob Carlson, the chamber auction winner, at the tiller. Everything I dreamed and more, Carlson said. He later told me, explaining how he had once traveled to Norway to sail smaller Viking ships. He came well prepared, carrying sunstone, the mineral the Vikings used to help them navigate on foggy days. He lunched with Turo in view. We lunched with Turo in view, then dropped sail in preparation for motoring home. But first came one important little housekeeping task. Somewhere between Plymouth and Petom, the ship's propeller snagged a lobster trap line. Peleo, a watch captain who made the 2016 Atlantic crossing on the Draken, donned a wetsuit and disappeared over the side of the ship. He returned with a severed line and an orange and white buoy. The sky darkened as we motored back to Plymouth. as Granite Point once again came into view, a welcome committee of pleasure boats began appearing to guide us home. The harbor master led the way down the channel, leading us through a mooring field filled with even more well-wishers, horns blaring, and people shouting, "Welcome to Plymouth," from the jetty and the shore. Allander showed his mastery maneuvering the big boat into a berth on the town wharf with little room to spare. Sporting maroon Draken shirts, the crew lined the side of the boat and basked in applause. After an official welcome from town officials, Allander summoned the crew for one more opstilling. "Congratulations," he said, pouring each crew member a shot of Plymouth gin, a welcoming gift from the chamber. Skål. Taking Plymouth by storm. Viking warship Draken Harald Harfarg arrives in Plymouth Harbor. The Vikings arrived in Plymouth Harbor Tuesday afternoon, disembarked, plundered, pillaged, then headed back to their 115-foot warship, where there was much rejoicing. Just kidding. There was no plundering or pillaging. However, the Draken Harald Harfarg Viking longship did take Plymouth by storm, drawing hundreds to water's edge at Town Pier, hundreds that whooped and hollered a warm welcome to crew, and whooped and hollered right back. Chronicles anchor Anthony Everett of media partner WCVB Channel 5 stood shoulder to shoulder with press from the Boston Globe and Old Colony Memorial in the Harbor Master's launch, which motored out to meet the living piece of history. Cameras clicked furiously as the ship's arrival drew a palpable hush from the crowd. Vikings in hilarious pretend Viking helmets with horns waved and thronged around the oaken creation. It was quite the day in Plymouth as the ship came in. Cannabis Inus. More companies want to grow marijuana businesses in Plymouth. The debate between fans and foes of legalized marijuana continues, and so does the parade of would-be cannabis retailers to the Board of Selectmen. This past Tuesday night, the board heard from representatives of 4 separate marijuana-based companies that want to start their business in Plymouth, ranging from a final presentation by Four Daughters LLC on the request for approval of their host community agreement to a firm that doesn't want to grow, process, or sell pot. They want to distribute it for others. For an hour or so, the debate over the ethics of marijuana sales were put aside. The business of marijuana was the focus, and through the proposals were all unique that stood out were the dollars that these companies, the community, and the state could reap if all went according to plan. Four Daughters went first. A condensed version of the arguments for approving Four Daughters' host agreement include a commitment to giving hiring preference to Plymouth residents, the creation and funding of a charitable organization, and an advance payment to the town of $1 million. Like other agreements negotiated by the town, the Four Daughters host agreement would also include potential lucrative escalators. If the state raised the maximum amount a host community could receive from 3% to 4%, Four Daughters would follow suit. If Four Daughters agreed to pay more for another facility in another community, they'd have to match that in Plymouth. Next up was Alfred's Finest, which is hoping to do it all: cultivate, process, and offer retail and wholesale marijuana sales from a 50,000 square foot greenhouse and 16,000 square foot processing retail facility, all to be located within Plymouth. Alfred's Finest has strong local connections, but what stood out in the presentation was the size and scope of their plan. Under their own list entitled How Plymouth Benefits, they predict the creation of up to 50 jobs, a potential $4.1 million payment to the town, $4.1 million payment to the town from a host agreement in the first 5 years of operation, up to $4.8 million in local sales tax in the first 5 years, and the addition to creation and funding of a charitable foundation. Are they just blowing smoke? The next presenter gave credence to the multifaceted approach taken by Alfred's Finest into the overall economic potential of this new industry. Eagle Eyes Transport LLC is a Massachusetts third-party cannabis transporter. As the Massachusetts cannabis industry begins to become operational over the coming year, professional transportation and distribution companies such as ours will be essential to a well-functioning market, their presentation states. Eagle Eye's proposal was much more modest. It needs smaller. Its potential financial contribution to the town not approaching the $1 million mark, and yet it was the clearest indication of the potential upside of the marijuana industry in Massachusetts. Just as industries such as food, Cisco, alcohol, Knife, and others require dedicated, cost-efficient distribution systems and providers, Eagle Eye says marijuana will as well. Eagle Eye would not be open to the public or serve consumers directly in any way, but would be business-to-business only, utilizing a fleet of unmarked, secure vehicles that would transport marijuana to dispensaries, retail sites, or processing operations in Massachusetts. Emerald Grove, Inc. also wants to cultivate and process marijuana and would utilize the product at both a medical marijuana treatment facility and a recreational marijuana retail facility, all to be located in Plymouth. Marijuana has been on the Selectmen's agenda for a few years now, but of the 4 presenters Tuesday night, only 4 Daughters is nearing the end of a long regulatory maze that prospective Massachusetts marijuana businesses are required to pass through. It remains possible at this late date, though, even with one company, Triple M, already operating medical marijuana dispensary in town and with an approved host agreement to offer retail sales at the same location, for the marijuana train to be derailed. In recent months, the Selectmen have debated, but not acted upon, the suggestion that they have the question of whether the town will allow retail marijuana facilities decided by a referendum. Unadorned reopening of Steinway Library. Pilgrim Hall unveils renovations to historic resource next Thursday. The world's foremost research library on the Pilgrim experience reopens next week with one notable difference. There won't be any books on the shelves when Pilgrim Hall Museum unveils the renovated Steinway Memorial Library Thursday. Over the course of the next several months, the 6,000-volume collection of everything Pilgrim will gradually take its place back on the screen steel bookshelves, but the museum wants to showcase the room itself when the ceremonial ribbon is cut Thursday night. We're opening it, but we're opening it unadorned because it's an opportunity to see the room as it was when it started out. Really want people to enjoy the beauty of the space, Donna Curtin, executive director of the Pilgrim Hall Museum, said. The library, built in 1905, has been under renovation since last winter. Work included restoring the cracked terrazzo,